Good afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you are and when you're watching this. My name is Laurel, and this is going to be about a 45-minute strength and mobility flow class that I've designed for you all. So without further ado, let's get onto our mats or our carpets or our floors or our grass, wherever you may be. And just find a comfortable position, start to move around a little bit as I introduce the theme of this practice. Maybe close down your eyes, listening to my voice, and just allowing yourself to shift from whatever you were doing before this to the next 45 minutes or so of your time. So I've designed this class with a quote in mind by Ido Portal, who says, "The best reason to move is because you can." And more, I find that to be true. And more I'm tapping into that sentiment in my movement practice. So my intention for this class today is that we can play around with some more traditional yoga flow postures, but make them a little bit more playful and just kind of explore the spaces in between to see how it feels. Something else that I want to talk about, and this is paraphrasing quite a bit from Ido Portal as well, are the three phases of practice, or the three zones of practice. The first zone being a movement that is super familiar to you. You've mastered it, you feel confident doing it at all times. The second zone is you've tried a movement before, you're maybe good at it, but you haven't perfected it. And then the third zone being the zone where something is completely novel. So it's brand new, you haven't done it before, your brain and your body has to work to make it happen. So I'm hoping to weave in these three zones of practice and movement into our time together today. So we're going to start on our knees in a tabletop position. If you have blocks where you are, it would be great to have them handy just in case. And as we start to move around, I want to mention that any of the things that I guide you through today are suggestions. And if something doesn't feel quite right or feels too intense, you are welcome, of course, at any time to choose something different. So take yourself to your tabletop position. And we're going to start in that kind of third zone of practice that I mentioned with something that's familiar. So we're going to start moving through some cat and cow poses. Starting with the cow, drop the belly button down as you lift the gaze up and inhale. And then curl the middle of the spine up towards the sky. Drop the head and neck heavy as you exhale. These are pretty familiar shapes, right? Whether you have like a dedicated yoga or movement practice or not, give yourself permission to close down your eyes, link your breath to your movement as you shift through these hopefully familiar shapes. I'm going to post a playlist link when I post this video. So if you'd like to have something to listen to, feel free to hop over there as well. Let's take one more cycle of breath, inhaling to gaze up, exhaling to curl under. And then start to move through kind of a second zone of practice, right? Start to wiggle or shift in ways that feel a little bit more unfamiliar. Not worrying what it looks like, just noticing what your body is asking for in this moment. And then play with that final zone of practice. Try to create a shape that your body has never found before. Still continuing to breathe. Taking your time, let this be a deliberate shift in both your state of mind and your physical movements. Excellent. When you're ready, return back to a regular tabletop position. From here, we're going to tuck the toes under and shift back to apply some pressure down from the hips to the heels. Maybe rock a little bit from side to side. Notice how the soles of your feet feel as you do this. And then just to peel open the chest, bring your shoulder blades together, clasp your hands behind your back. Imagine there's a heavy weight attached to your knuckles. Feel them draw down towards the ground. Maybe tilt the head up, take a big breath in and out here. Excellent. Release the clasp of your hands, come out of this shape, come onto your butt. Swing your legs in front of you, plant your feet on the ground. So now we're going to start getting into some of the kind of weirder or funkier movements that I hope that we can play around with today. A reminder that I've designed this class to be a little bit funky and experimental. So just see what things feel like in your body. So if the cat and cow are these familiar movements, let's move into a movement that maybe you did probably a long time ago, but maybe haven't done for a while, which is a crab walk. So keep the feet planted on the ground, bring your hands behind you so that your fingers are pointed in towards your butt. And then as you inhale, lift the hips up towards the sky for a reverse tabletop. And then paying attention to your left foot and your right hand, we're going to walk backwards. So you lift both of those limbs and place them back down. Doesn't have to be big steps. And then alternate. So this is that crab walk that you might have done when you were little. It's obviously called that because this is how crabs tend to walk. Alternating your limbs, just noticing how these movements feel in your body. Once you get to the edge of your space, go in the opposite direction. Maybe lifting your hips up a little bit higher, see how that changes the shape. Perfect. And then when you're back at where you started, lower your hips down to the ground. Okay, I'm going to swivel around and we're going to find what I imagine for many of you will be a totally unfamiliar process or a movement pattern. So this is another like Ido Portal kind of inspired movement, which is the duck walk. So I'm coming up onto my toes. And if you already know that this balance is going to be tricky, this would be a good opportunity for you to grab some blocks. And then we're going to duck walk forward. So the duck walk looks like lifting one foot out from underneath you and stepping it forward. And then shifting the weight into that foot to release the opposite foot and walk forward. So with the blocks, it can kind of look like being guided like this. And then I'm going to attempt to go backwards without the blocks just to see how that feels. A lot of action in the feet, a lot of action in the core, in the butt. You can see why it's called a duck walk. We're going to do that one more time to the edge of our space. So walk forward. And you can play around with kind of swinging your feet out to the side, but see what it feels like to try and keep the feet underneath you. What does that require of your knees? Again, using those blocks if you need the extra support. This isn't meant to be painful, but it is meant to be novel. Nice. Okay. And then we end up at the place where we started. Go ahead and release your knees down to the ground, wiggle out your hips. I'm going to spin around so I'm in the orientation that I began in. And then we're going to continue to warm up as we shift into our flow. So from here, we're going to come to a forearm plank. So lower the forearms down to the ground, extend the legs back behind you, flex the feet, and then find that kind of straight line from the crown of your head to the heels of your feet. From here, we're going to play around with rounding our backs and rolling up into a dolphin pose. I have to step my feet in a little bit, but we don't want to step them in too much because we're going to shift right back to a forearm plank. So just notice how this feels. I like to drop my head down low, and then as I inhale, shift the weight into the forearms, maybe slide my feet back, come back to that forearm plank. Exhale, lift the hips up high, dolphin, like I'm melting the armpits back towards my toes. Inhale, shift back to plank. Two more like that. Notice how your shoulders feel. Notice how that space in between the shapes feels for your shoulders. Last Dolphin pose, lifting the hips up high. And then lower the knees down to the ground right where they are. Lower the toenails down to the mat. Release the chest and the chin. Find a puppy pose. Release your forehead or your chin down towards the ground. Take a big breath in here. And a big breath out. Tuck the toes under from your puppy pose. Slink forward to shift back into a forearm plank. 3 more like that. Knees drop down, hips lift up high, armpits melt down towards the ground, puppy pose. Paying attention once again to the sensations in your shoulders. Let's do that 2 more times. Shift the weight into your forearms, lift the knees off the ground. Lower the knees, shift the hips back. And then try to smooth out the space between those shapes. Slink your way forward as if you're trying to be sneaky and quiet. Lift the knees off the ground at the last moment. And then with control, lower the knees back down. Shift the hips up and back. Very nice. On your next inhale, slink forward, staying low to the ground, and lower your hips down to the mat. Come to a sphinx position. Bring your legs wide so that your feet are as wide as your mat if you're working with one, and just allow your hips to shift from side to side. Dip one shoulder into the middle of your space, gazing past the opposite shoulder. And then move with your breath, shift to the other side. One more time, just like that. Getting in the zone of our practice now. Hopefully feeling a little bit warmed up. Excellent. Coming back to center, moving your elbows out of the way, lowering the rest of your body down. Hands come to either side of your chest. Shift back to a brief seated position. So I just want to explain the format of this practice. So we're going to move through kind of 3 rounds, and they're all going to have variations of the same sequence of poses. So it's going to look a little bit like a traditional kind of flow, but it's going to be a distant cousin of that. So we're going to start in each position with a downward facing dog, add some fun variations into that each round. And it'll kind of build progressively. So each round, at least for me, becomes a little bit more challenging. So I hope that you'll join me and see how it feels in your body. Okay, let's get started. So we'll start in a downward facing dog. When you're ready, shift into that shape, hips lift up high, knees bend a lot. There's no trophy for muscling your legs into a straight position. Bend your knees and allow your hips to lift up high. Shake your head, yes and no. Very nice. Okay, and just like we did in that crab walk, we're going to play around in our downward facing dog, stepping forward by a couple steps. The left hand and the right foot move at the same time. And then the left foot and the right hand move at the same time. So you're maintaining the shape of that downward facing dog as much as possible, but you're traveling with it. Go forward a few steps, go backwards a few steps. Taking this familiar shape, maybe it exists in a zone, 1, super familiar for you, and then we're playing around with it, maybe leveling it up to a zone 2 or 3. Take a couple more steps, just play around with those sensations in your body, and then return back to where you started in a downward facing dog. Okay, from here, lower the forearms down towards the ground. Dolphin pose. Feeling the shoulders activate once again. Start to slide the feet back behind you, lower your hips to a forearm plank. 3 more breaths. We've already done this. We're just going to incorporate it into our flow. So the inhale brings us to this forearm plank. The exhale shifts our hips up high for a dolphin. And then ripple through your spine as you inhale, round through your back to shift with strength into your forearm plank. Use the exhale to lift the hips. Allow that ripple to travel all the way down your spine to your head. Puppy pose. 1 more just like that. Shift forward. Exhale, dolphin. Hips lift up high. Okay, step the feet a little bit closer to your elbows, come to a dolphin with the hips a little bit higher. And this is where we're going to play around. Inhale, lift the left leg up and back. Bend that left knee, get a nice stretch in that hip, and keep the forearm of the right arm glued down to the ground, but lift the left forearm up. So now you're on the left hand and the right forearm. Notice how this feels in your body. Start to let your hip peel open. Maybe you play around with balance, kicking up through that right foot. If that's not part of your practice, don't worry about it. Okay, and then lift up to a three-legged downward facing dog. Maybe you fall out of it like I just did. You're on both hands now. That left leg is still lifted, left knee is still bent. Draw the left knee through your body. Plant the left knee down on the ground. Lower the back knee down to the ground. And then allow your hips to fall over to the left. Okay, from here, we're gonna find our way to a 90-90. So bringing this front leg to a 90-degree bend in that knee. And then the same with the back leg. So we have two 90-degree bends right here in this front knee, which if you're following my cue is the left, and then in the back, which is the right. Okay, so these are a popular mobility exercise we're gonna play around with for a couple rounds. And the idea here is that your feet stay in the same position, but you rotate towards the back of your space. So the knees lift up and the hips explore their internal and external rotation. We're gonna do that 2 more times to each side. I like to keep my hands in towards my chest just to challenge myself. But if it feels good for you to use your hands on the ground, feel free to do that. And just kind of notice all the space that you're opening up in your hips. Shifting back. Beautiful. Okay, hopefully things are starting to open up a little bit. And if you still feel pretty stiff, that is okay. We're still early in our practice. Come back to the 90-90 that you started in, facing towards the front of your space. Draw this left ankle in towards your body, and then flip the right hip so that your leg extends in front of you. So you're just kind of unwinding it to bring it to a seated tree pose with one foot in towards the sole of your foot, or sole of your right thigh, excuse me. Okay, we're gonna take our left hand, place it behind us on the ground. Fingertips are pointing away from our bodies. And then like there's an imaginary table in front of you. With your right arm, we're going to slide the hand on that table, lift the hips up, coming up onto that left shin and the right foot. Let the right arm just fall back behind you, peel your chest open. Enjoy this stretch. Big inhale and big exhale, lower back down. Okay, stay with me here. Both hands come to the front of your space, in front of this foot that is angled in towards your thigh. Lift back into your shin. Okay. Tuck the left toes under, and then realign your ankle on that bent leg with your knee. So it's kind of angled in. We're going to angle it back out so there's a line from your knee to your foot. Tuck the back toes under, shift your weight into that foot to come to a skandasana, or like a side lunge. So hopefully you can see this. My right leg is extended. Some people like to point their toes or flex their toes, just play around with what that feels like in your body. And then we're gonna shift into a Cossack squat to the other side. This is another great opportunity to use some blocks if you have them handy. Trying to keep your butt low to the ground, shifting into the skandasana on the other side. And I know I'm not staying close to my mat, so hopefully you're in a space where you can move around some. Shift back into the stretch on the other side, bending that knee, popping up onto the toes, trying to keep that heel as low as possible, but we'll have other chances to mess with our ankle mobility tonight. One more time to each side, keeping your hips low, feeling that stretch in your hips, that strength in your hips along the way. And then back to where we started. Okay, very nice. Release those blocks if you still have them. We're going to close out every round with messing with kind of a strange animal movement, just like we began with. So from here, come back to the center of your space and then straighten your legs, find a straddle forward fold, just rinse off from it. Excellent. And then I'm going to orient myself so you can see what I'm doing. We're coming to like a wide-legged forward fold, and we're going to do what's called a monkey walk. So I'm going to lower my hips down. My hands are usually underneath my shoulders, but what I'm going to do is place my left hand over to the right, like I'm reaching over to the right side, placing my hands first, so left hand and then right hand. And as I shift my weight, I'm going to pop my feet over as well. So now the left foot is behind the left hand and the right foot is over to the right. I'm moving in one direction to start, so my hands shift over to the right side, and then my hips pop up to allow my feet to travel as well. Once you reach the edge of your space like I have, we're going to go in the opposite direction. The hands shift over to the left, and just notice how your body makes that possible as you lift your feet. And hopefully you can kind of see the monkey namesake here. Hands come down to the ground, shift your weight, pop your feet over to the side. And if it takes you a couple times to even understand what we're doing here, that's okay. That's what happens when we exist in this kind of space of novelty. Okay, feel free to move out of that. We're going to swivel around to the top of our space, return back to a downward facing dog. Reset here. Take a big inhale through the nose, a big exhale through the mouth. Okay, we'll even things out for this round, coming back down to our forearms, stepping the feet back until you arrive in your forearm plank. 3 shifts into dolphin. Inhale as you come to your forearm plank. Exhale, lift the hips up and back, relax the head and neck. Inhale, shift forward, spread your fingers wide. Marvel at how your body can move in all these shapes. One more, inhale, lower. Exhale, back. Step your feet up towards your elbows, come to your dolphin pose. Head and neck hang heavy. Just like we played with on the other side, the right leg lifts, right knee bends, peel that hip open. Hopefully that feels like a good stretch. And then pop up onto the right hand. The left forearm is still glued down to the ground. The right hand is on the ground. And then see what it feels like to play around with shifting into a balance. Okay, if you've had enough of that, lift up to a 3-legged downward facing dog, keeping that right leg lifted. And then exhale, draw that right leg through your body, place the right knee down on the ground, lower the left knee back, get a little stretch here, and then allow your hips to come over to the side of your space. We find the 90-90 facing the other direction. So the right knee is now in front, left knee finds the 90 degrees behind you, and then start to move through that shift, shifting over to the opposite side, and then back to the front of your space. And I have a tendency to move forward, so I have to adjust every time. But it still feels really good. Try to be deliberate and mindful as you move from shape to shape. Hopefully you're enjoying this. Tap back into that sense of playfulness. The best reason to move is because we can. Okay, excellent. We're going to come back to that 90-90 where we started. And just for demonstrative purposes, I'm going to spin around. So the right leg is in front. Just like we did before, bring that right foot in towards your body. Swivel the left hip so that left leg can extend long. Right hand comes behind you, fingers pointing away from your body. Slide your left hand in front of you on that imaginary table. Lift up onto the shin, lift the hips up. Peel the front of the body open. Let the chest peel open as well. Big breath in. And big breath out. Lower the hips down towards the ground. Bring the hands to the front of your space and then shift forward once again to come into this kind of half tabletop. Swivel that back knee so that the back ankle is in line with the knee. Talking about the right ankle and knee. Tuck the toes under, shift your weight back to come into those toes. So hopefully you can see this again. Same thing we did on the other side, just evening things out. Grab your blocks if you like to have them. Otherwise, shift, walking your hands over to the opposite side into your Cossack squat on this side. And if these feel super sticky to you, even more reason to do them, right? To play around with them. Let's do one more time to each side, trying to keep your hips low, feeling the mechanics of your body as you shift from one side to the other. Lovely. And we end up right back where we started. Okay, come back to the center of your space, straighten both legs, straddle, standing forward fold, let everything hang heavy. Notice what sensations come into your body here. And again, I'm going to swivel so I have some more space. Moving to either side, let's play around with our monkey walks one more time. Drop the hips low, bring the hands to the right. Imagine that you're shifting the weight first into your hands and then into your feet, right? To kind of delay that movement. Shift your hands over to the right, shift your feet over to the right. I'm going to walk in the other direction. Take just a couple more seconds to play with these. And it can be really strenuous, right? We're not used to moving in this way. It's a lot of core stuff happening, a lot of shoulder stuff. So just play with it. Maybe yours look totally different than this. When you get back to the top of your space, swivel so you're back in the position that you started in, and then just let everything hang heavy, head and neck. Inhale to a halfway lift. This is going to be kind of our rinse off after each round. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale all the way back up to standing, or actually up to standing for the first time. Give yourself a second to recalibrate, shake out your hips, and prepare for round number 2. Okay, so from here, squeeze your shoulder blades together, get broad in your chest. Inhale the arms up overhead, and exhale, dive all the way down. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, release. Okay, let's bring our hands down to the ground. Shift back to a downward facing dog. Let the head and neck hang heavy. We're going to keep playing with these down dogs. So what we're going to do this time, last time we walked, right? We walked to the opposite limbs, going in either direction. That was cool. That was fun. Now we're going to add a hop. So this is a little bit trickier for my brain and for my body. But essentially, we're going to lift the left hand and right foot and then hop forward with those limbs. And then the same thing with the left foot, right hand, hop. And ideally, only 2 points of contact are against the ground at each time, right? Because you're kind of playing around with this sensation of alternating the hopping. And if that's, again, a little bit tricky, just know that that's like part of the fun of it. And then see if you reach the end of your space, if you can do it backwards. The tricky part for me is trying to lift both of the limbs at the same time. I'm going to do it for a couple more seconds. Hopefully you'll join me. Not getting discouraged. Going backwards is way harder for me too. Okay, excellent. Return back to the top of your space. Downward facing dog. Stay with me. And then round your spine forward. Come to a plank position. Straight line from the crown of the head to the heels. So just like I said, this is going to get kind of progressively more intense. If you're not having a good time with that plank and you want to drop down to your knees, that is perfect. I'm going to cue us through 3 breaths, shifting from our plank, rounding the spine, downward facing dog. Inhale back to plank. Squeeze your butt, squeeze your core. You're so strong. Lift the hips up and back. One more like that if you're with me. Inhale to plank. Exhale back. If your wrists are feeling okay, we're going to keep going. If not, drop down, give them a little bit of a break. Meet back up with us when you're ready. From here, the left leg inhales up towards the sky. Bend that left knee, draw it through the body, and then hover that left knee next to the left elbow. So you're really lifting up through the core. And then draw that left knee over to the right elbow. Stay with me. Kick that left leg out to the side, placing the knife edge of the left foot out to the right side of your body. And then swivel the right foot down towards the ground. Maybe slide it away from you so that you can lift your right hand, come to a wild thing. I like to bend that front knee. It's more comfortable for me than keeping it straight, but you do what you want. Take a big breath in here. I know it's intense. Lift the hips up towards the sky. And then lower the hips down to the ground. Come back to that seated tree pose. So now the left foot is in towards the right thigh. Shake out your wrists. I know that was a lot of action. Bring the left hand behind you. Sweep open, just like we did before. Hips lift on the shin, on the foot, and then exhale. Lower back down. Bring the hands in front of you. Shift onto that knee. Tuck the left toes back behind you. Realign the ankle with the knee, and then come back to your skandasana. Okay, so just like we did before, the weight is on the toes. If you have the ankle flexibility, your weight might be on the full foot down towards the ground, but I'm not there yet. Okay, and we're going to intensify this a little bit this time too. So we're going to fold the right foot down to the ground and then try to keep your hips low as you shift your weight over to find the stretch on the other side. So this is more moving into this kind of Cossack squat from side to side. And I don't have the strength or the mobility yet to make that happen super smoothly. But what I'm playing with is applying just a little bit of pressure towards the ground so I can really rely on my legs to try and conjure the strength and then come back. And again, if you want to use blocks for this, that's great. Shift one more time to the back or to the right. And trust your body, how strong it is, trust that it can learn. Shift back to the left. Really nice. Okay, from here, I'm gonna switch my hands over to the left side and swivel that back leg, come into a downward facing dog. Might not be the smoothest transition, but that's where we're headed. Let the head and neck relax. Very nice. Inhale the right leg up high. Exhale, draw the right knee in towards the right elbow. Hover here for a moment. Shift that right knee over to the left. Okay, I'm gonna swivel around for demonstrative purposes. So that right knee is covered by the left elbow. Kick that leg long. Knife edge of the foot against the ground. Maybe you slide it away from you. Shift your weight into the right hand. Flip that back foot down. Lift up into wild thing. Again, this front knee can be bent, or this right knee rather can be bent or straight, whatever you're into. Lift the hips up high for one more breath. And then lower, exhale. Beautiful. Okay, this right foot comes in towards the inner thigh. The left leg is extended. Right hand behind you. Sweep in front and up. Open in that front body. And exhale, lower down. Bring the hands in front of you. Shift onto your knee. Swivel that back foot so it's in line with the back knee. I'm saying back, but I'm meaning right. Find your way onto that right foot, onto those right toes. And then 2 more times to each side. Once again, play with your Cossack squat. And maybe it hurts or it doesn't feel good on your ankles to go all the way down. You can also hang out up here, shift from side to side. The idea is that you're noticing how your body's moving, challenging yourself, breathing. I'm going to take one more to each side because it feels so good. Ending back with my weight on the right side, coming back to that Skandasana. Arms come to the right side of my space. Flip the left toes back and under. Lift your way back to a downward facing dog. Even things out. Let your head and neck relax. Exhale, release. Step your feet up to meet your wrists. Bend your knees a lot. Standing forward fold. That's nearly the end of round 2. You're hopefully at the top of your space. And if not, make your way back there. Okay. We're going to mess around with another animal movement called the Frogger. So from here, actually, let's step towards the back of our space. So at least we're moving forward to begin. So come to the back of your space. And I like to bring my feet about as wide as my mat. Drop the hips down, drop the hands down to the ground. And you can probably guess where we're going, but the hands come in front of you, shifting your weight into the hands so that your feet can hop forward. So kind of like a frog trying to cross the road. And this, again, can look like anything. What we're trying to feel or notice, right, is how our core responds, how our shoulders respond. If your legs don't want to leave the ground, that's information, right? It's really valuable information. Take your frogger backwards. Hands come to the ground, weight shifts there. Feet shift back, weight shifts there. Still breathing. Take a few more seconds to play with this in any direction. You can use blocks under your hands for this if that feels better too. Okay, wonderful. When you've had enough, straighten your legs, let the upper body hang heavy. We rinse off that round. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, lower down. Inhale all the way up to standing. Arms reach up overhead. Arms come down to your sides. And just allow yourself to recalibrate. Shake out your legs, shake out your wrists. If you're still with me, I'm so happy that you are. I'm running out of breath. I wonder if you are. And we're going to move through our final sequence. So when you're ready, go ahead and ball up your fists and rotate your wrists. This is a wrist heavy practice with all the downward facing dogs. So just give yourself time to reset from that. Spin your wrists in the opposite direction. Very nice. And then release the balls of your fists and imagine that you're flicking water. Just release some of that tension. Shake out your hands. Maybe give your forearms a little manual stretch. Okay, let's move through the final round of this. Thanks for humoring me and playing around with me a little bit today. So when you're ready, inhale the arms up overhead. Exhale, dive down. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, dive down. Hands come to the ground, step your feet back to a downward facing dog. This is our last funky down dog that we're going to play around with. And if it feels better to come down to your knees and watch me do this the first time, you're welcome to do that. Give your wrists a break before we move into the actual shapes. So what we're going to do is imagine that you're doing that walk, right? So the left hand moves forward, so does the right foot, except that this time, as the left hand moves forward, we're going to shift into more of a plank and kind of rest that right knee on top of the right elbow. So we're just like bringing the walk closer to the ground. Place the toes on the ground and then do the same thing on the other side. So the right hand reaches forward and then the left knee kind of lowers down to the left elbow. It's a lot more strenuous, at least for me it is. Lower the toes down to the ground, reach the left hand forward, shift the right knee to right elbow. Toes lower down. Continue to do that. I'm running out of space, at least where the camera can see me. So I'm going to start going backwards, which again is really tricky because you're kind of connecting the elbow to the knee, right? So my right foot steps back, my left hand reaches so that the weight of my knee is like touching that left elbow. And then I step back with my left foot and the right elbow comes in contact with my right knee. If it doesn't make sense for you to go backwards yet, then just play around with moving forwards and resetting. And it's really cool if you want to watch some YouTube videos of people doing this, who are really strong and agile, because it requires like full body strength to move through these. Play around with that for a couple more seconds. If you've had enough, give yourself a break. Maybe roll out your wrists again. Perfect. And then when you're ready, meet me back in a downward facing dog. Just a regular old downward facing dog. Do you even remember what that feels like now that we've done these funky ones? Head and neck relax. Inhale, left leg high. Exhale, left knee bends, comes in between our hands. From here, bring the left foot down to the ground. Lower the back knee to the ground. Find a low lunge. This is a good chance to grab those blocks again if you want to. Shift the hips low, maybe drop the back toes down to the ground. Give yourself a moment to reset here and just feel this stretch. If your knee is dipping past your ankle, that's totally fine. A lot of teachers that I respect are talking more and more about how these kind of physical limitations that we get in the habit of creating for our bodies, they don't actually do us a lot of good. So, like, have you ever heard, that, oh, you shouldn't let the knee go past the ankle? And we're starting to interrogate if those rules are real. And even by keeping them in place psychologically, we kind of change our relationships to our bodies, right? Because we convince ourselves that we can't do this. So play around with that space. That's what this class is all about. And then when you're ready to move on to the next shape, drop the hands down to the ground. We're going to step this left foot over to the right and then lower the knee down to the ground to come into a pigeon position. I have to move my right knee over to the right to give my hips some lateral space, and then kind of walk my right knee away from my left foot to give my hips some space in that direction as well. If you know that you like to have a block or a blanket under your butt on the left side, feel free to kind of mind that gap between your butt and the ground. Take a big breath in here and a big breath out. There's an option here to intensify this or to de-intensify this, okay? If you're looking for lower intensity, maybe you shift into more of a sleeping pigeon with your forearms on a block. Going for a really deep stretch or a stretch, the depth will depend on your body on that left side. If you're craving more intensity, we're going to do some lifts out of this pigeon. So really squeeze your inner thighs together. See what it feels like to maybe bring your hands to meet in front of your chest. So in this position, we're not just kind of flopping down. It's a super active position. I'm lifting through my entire body, okay? And then lower down. Inhale to lift. Exhale to lower. Now, if this is too much for your knee or anything else, maybe use some blocks to take some of the weight off and play around with the movement that way. What we're going for is feeling the strength in your hip flexor, in your hamstring on the left side. There's a whole lot going on. Take one more lift and one more lower. Allow your hip on the left side to flatten down, just like we did in the last 2 rounds. Swivel to turn so that the right leg is extended and the left foot comes to that inner right thigh. Left hand comes behind you. You know where we're going. Lift the hips up towards the sky. Arm sweeps up overhead. Big inhale here. Exhale, lower the hips back down. Hands come to the front of the space. This is the same sequence as before. Shift onto that knee. Recalibrate through that left ankle. Tuck the toes under and shift back. Maybe you try to sink the heel a little bit closer to the ground this time, using blocks as always if you need to. And then find one more round of your Cossack squat. As the most kind of intense round here, I'm going to try to stay as low to the ground as possible, shift to the other side. It requires a whole lot of work from my legs, from my core. So if that's not your jam, don't worry about it. Allow this to be like a playground for you and your body. If you want to shift your hips up high and shift the weight over into one foot and then the other, that's a great way to do this as well. Remembering to breathe, take one more stretch to either side. Beautiful. We're going to end back up with our weight on the left side. Okay, and then a funky transition here. Lower this left knee down to the ground, flip the toes back under you, sink the hips back down to the ground. We're going to extend both legs now and kind of see what it feels like to even things out. So instead of a 90-90 here, just start by rotating your torso and then touching down the big toe of your right leg to the ground. And then inhaling as you shift to the other side, touching down the big toe of the left foot to the ground. Just playing around with some hip rotation here. Notice what that feels like with your legs extended. And maybe your toes don't touch the ground. Maybe they rotate a little bit inwards. Maybe that's enough. You know your body better than anybody else does. Certainly better than I do from a YouTube video. One more time to each side. Beautiful work. Bring both of your feet in. Hug your knees in towards your body. Maybe drop your forehead down towards your knees. Get round through your back. And when you're ready, we're going to close out our practice with the final side. So make your way onto your knees into a downward facing dog. Again, take your time to get there. Maybe you want to start towards the back of your space because it felt better to walk forward in this funky downward facing dog, knee to elbow kind of walk. So find your way to that down dog. Allow your head to roll. And then when you're ready, step forward with the left hand, draw the right knee to the right elbow, just tapping it there, trying to keep your shoulders low, like you're kind of slinking along the ground like a lizard. Drop the right foot down, reach the right hand forward, shift that left knee to the left elbow, toes touch down, shift back over. Try to minimize the swinging of your hips from side to side. That's easier said than done, at least in my body. If you want to play around with moving backwards, start to do that. And play around with this for just one more moment. Trying to stay low to the ground. Feel every part of your body involved in this shape. It's pretty amazing. Okay, your brain is working too. Make your way back to a downward facing dog when you've had enough. Bring the big toes a little bit closer together. Inhale the right leg high. Exhale the right knee through the body. Place the right knee down on the ground. Just kidding, sorry. Place the right foot down on the ground. Lower the left knee down, coming back to your low lunge. I love a low lunge with some blocks. Go ahead and grab both. Flip the back toes down. Allow yourself to rest here. Breathing into the pelvis, getting broad through your chest. I have such a tendency to hunch forward. See what it feels like to get really broad in the chest. Okay, the home stretch here. Release those blocks. Step the foot over to the left side of your space. And then fold the rest of that leg down, coming to your version of a pigeon. I don't want to be afraid of pigeon, but I do want to be mindful that it doesn't feel good for everybody. So if it doesn't feel good for you, you're welcome to come back to a 90-90. Your hips are going to enjoy the same benefits in that type of shape. Choose your adventure with your pigeon here. Maybe you want to move into more of a passive stretch, bolstering that right butt cheek between you and the ground if that feels good. Maybe you're interested in playing around with a more active pigeon. Maybe you use your blocks and inhale to lift, squeezing your inner thighs together. You can use your hand to like feel what muscles are working. For me, it's the hamstring on the right side and the hip flexor on the left. I can feel them both really engaged. Lower down. 3 more like that. Inhale, lift. Exhale, lower. Inhale, lift. Wherever you are, savor this last breath here. Express gratitude to your body, all the things that it can do, all the things it can learn. Lower that right hip to the ground. Shift your weight onto that right side. I'm going to swivel around so you can see me once again, but swivel that left hip around so we come back to this familiar position, right? Moving through these zones of kind of shapes that we feel on a spectrum of more and less familiar with. Right hand comes back behind you. Inhale, sweep up. This is one of my favorite stretches of all time. Exhale, lower down. Wonderful. Okay, bring the hands in front of you. This is our last series of Cossack squats. Tuck the back toes under, shift the hips back. And again, you can make this what you want it to be. So I'm going to choose to keep playing with flattening that left foot down, keeping my hips low, shifting my left hip down to my left heel. For me, these poses are multi-pronged because it's a little bit of ankle mobility practice. It's a lot of strength practice. It's a lot of trusting a process, not getting frustrated with myself or judgmental of myself for not being able to look a certain way, right? Or move in a certain way. Continue to shift from side to side, moving through your version of these. Having the only intention here to be to experience something new. Move through each side once more. I hope your hips are feeling good and open. Or at least you're aware of how they're feeling, whether it's positive or negative. Okay. Shift that right knee back down towards the ground when you're back on the right side. Flip the left toes under and then rock that right hip back down to the ground. Extend both legs out, seated straddle. You can do the feet rotation again if that felt good, but I'm going to suggest that we just bow forward to get a really nice seated straddle stretch. Keep your toes vaguely pointed upwards, knees pointed up towards the sky. Maybe bring your hands in front of you if that feels good. Allow your head and neck to relax. Join me for a couple more breaths here. When you're ready, gently make your way back upright. Hug your knees in towards your body. Allow everything to reset. Tuck the forehead towards the knees, round through the back and the neck. And sit back upright. I want us to rinse off this final round like we did the others. So from here, make your way to a final downward facing dog. Might have lied about that last one being the last one. Take a big breath in and out here. And then travel to the top of your space. Feet come towards wrists. Let your entire torso hang heavy. Bend your knees as much as feels good. Inhale to a halfway lift. Exhale, melt forward. Inhale all the way up to standing, the last time of your practice tonight. Arms reach up overhead. Exhale, arms come down to your sides. And then take it down to a seated position. We'll close our eyes to close out our practice together. And I offer a final breath as an expression of gratitude to you for making it this far, for moving around with me. It's really motivating to me to be able to do these kinds of practices with other people and to hear what they think of them, because it's something that I'm learning about and experimenting with at the same time. So I'm going to close my eyes, and I hope that you'll join me for one final inhale and exhale. I'll empty my lungs here and inhale with you and exhale with you. Take a bow forward if that helps you close down your practice. And coming back to the world around you whenever you're ready. Thank you so much for joining me. And please let me know what you think of this class. And I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.